Yeah, thanks everyone for joining us for this event. Excited to share with you what we're working on here with our partner Quokka. I'm Kevin Taylor, Manager of Channel Sales and Partnerships here at Hexnode. And for this episode of Hexnode Live, we're tackling the very exciting world of mobile security. It's no secret that every business uses a plethora of mobile apps for work, and monitoring all of them is a challenge in and of itself. But with AI stirring the pot in ways we couldn't have predicted even just a year ago, these challenges have become far from simple. So, to address these obstacles, Hexnode has teamed up with Quokka, a leading player in mobile risk intelligence, to level up on how we protect these mobile environments. This partnership, now available for iOS and Android, combines Quokka's continuous risk monitoring with Hexnode's app management capabilities. What does that mean for you? It means we're closing the app security gap that's been giving IT admins headaches for years. It means Quokka will be continuously monitoring every app for malicious behavior, vulnerabilities, privacy risks. And when Quokka detects something, Hexnode will be right there to block it or uninstall it, keeping your environment safe. So to dive deeper into this partnership, we have Chris Gogol and Vijay Pawar from Quokka and our own Paul Hedesheimer joining us today. Together, we're going to walk you through this integration and explain how you can make the most out of it. The key takeaway here is quite simple. Hexnode and Quokka together are giving you a tighter, more secure, intelligent way to secure your environment in terms of mobile apps. So good to see you, gentlemen. Thanks so much for being here with us. It's haven't seen you guys since Vegas. You know, we had that wild hangover style night. I think we found BJ on the roof of the Aria, But yeah, good to see you guys. Thanks for joining. I thought we'd just kick it off with some brief intros if you want to. So Chris, you want to kick us off?
Sure. Yeah. Thanks, Kevin. Still recovering from that night. Yeah. Um, yeah. Chris Gogol. I'm here at Quokka supporting our business lines, customer engagements for our product lines around mobile app security. So looking forward to the discussion today. For me, a lot of background, about 10 years in mobile security, specifically Android and iOS security. And day to day, I'm mostly dealing with clients, either pre or post, procurement of our solutions, helping them architect and then deploy mobile security solutions. So looking forward to the discussion today and kind of bringing some of those best practices and other things I learned along the way over the last 10 years working with those clients to the conversation today. Over to you, VJ.
Yeah, great. Hey, thanks, and great seeing the rest of the crew here. Vijay Pawar, I head up product here at Quokka. Just background on myself. I've been here a couple of years, but really, I spent nearly 7.5 years at a UEM company, obviously UEM MDM. And one of the key things was we also embedded security at that point from a third-party vendor. And there's a lot of learnings in there, right, that we came out with over the years. Adding this to the on-device MDM agent. How did it work with customers? What did they see? So a lot of learnings out there, just like Chris said, what I do and what the team does, and product engineering, obviously in connection with our other departments, is making sure that these products are, you provide security, but something that can be deployed, something that is actionable, that provides value over time. So looking forward to this conversation, and bringing forth all this experience that we have had and learnings, and sharing it, widely here.
Yeah, and hi, I'm Paul Hedesheimer. Over 35 years in information technology, nearly 20 in cybersecurity. Been here at Hexnode a little over a year, and it's been an exciting ride as we've built out the capabilities, the feature sets, and built relationships with partners like Quokka to deliver more cybersecurity services from our platform. The integration is really exciting. Really the endpoint is the battlefield that's out there. It's an area that is very much overlooked, undermanaged, and it scares a lot of people because they're not exactly sure where to even begin. So I think after listening on this session today and reaching out for more questions, I think a lot more people will feel better and more comfortable about a UEM solution and a security integration to better protect their fleet, to better protect their workforce, and all the data and applications that organizations use. So, looking forward to further conversations and a continued long and healthy and fun partnership with the guys over at Quokka.
Awesome. Yeah, terrific. So, just have a handful of questions for you guys to kind of help frame this and I think explain what we're trying to do and where we're going with it. So, first question, I just want to kick things off by starting with the most talked about and concerning developments in cybersecurity today, and that's the role of generative AI. AI isn't just automating existing attack vectors, but fundamentally transforming them from polymorphic malware to deep fake driven social engineering. But for mobile endpoints, the biggest challenge is the rise of the AI generated malicious apps so perfectly mimic all the legitimate ones. Given such a rapidly escalating paradigm, how does the Hexnode Quokka integration specifically adapt to and counteract these AI powered threats? Chris, do you want to start on this one?
Yeah, sure. This is a great question, a very topical one, and highlights one of the big, benefits of this partnership here. One of the challenges with, VJ mentioned, he worked at a different organization that was trying to integrate security. Traditional security approaches, usually take the approach of what you're familiar with on your desktop environment. You have an antivirus. It's going to look for signatures of known bad things. And hey, if it finds one, it can block it. But today, especially in mobile, the world is completely different, and that approach no longer is sufficient to completely protect you. And the reasons you mentioned, Kevin, in the question are spot on. The AI is enabling people to create new copies of malicious applications that perfectly mimic legitimate applications, and even to create applications at a scale not seen before, where an attacker may have previously spent a lot of time developing one, maybe 10, maybe even 100 different variants of a malware, which then can be caught up in the signature database. Now they're generating 10,000, 100,000 different variants. So that signature-based approach of looking for just like a hash, is that thing malicious, can no longer catch all of these different variants. So it demands a different approach to detecting that malware. And this is where our partnership comes in. Hexnode is able to then identify what are those things on the device that I can see, communicate to Quokka, where we can then do our behavioral modeling. So we built an AI machine learning approach to actually detail the behavior of what these applications are doing when they're installed on your device. And the benefit here is all we need is the application itself. We don't need to deploy anything extra to your Hexnode deployment. We don't need to add to your Hexnode app. All of it is done through API plugins between Hexnode and Quokka. So we'll get to some of that value for why that's important later. But the behavioral model will look at specifically what is the app doing when it runs on your phone and details all of these things. And then using the AI and machine learning approach, we can then identify which of those behaviors are malicious. Because traditional security testing isn't really looking for malware or malicious things. You could have a very secure piece of malware. It's encrypting everything properly. It's got TLS 1.3 with HTTPS. It's using proper SHA-256 hashes, whatever it might be, but it's still stealing data. So when we're looking at that behavior, it's being able to tell the difference between application A, which is accessibility application to help people that are hard of hearing use mobile devices, let's say. So they request special permissions in order to do that. And they're using that permission for a very legitimate purpose, and they're doing it in a proper way. Application B, they're requesting the same set of permissions, but they're using it in a completely different way that's violating the user's privacy and helping it to steal data. How do you tell the difference without some deep insights into the applications? Well, the simple answer is you can't. So that's why we built this behavioral model to be able to identify how is that permission being used? What is that application doing? And being able to then see, hey, this application, even though it's not in the signature database, the antivirus doesn't flag it, it's actually behaving like a Trojan because we can tell inside the application what it's doing, what API calls it's using, how it's modifying and transferring your data. So it's a new approach to malware detection that really brings its full value with the plugin to Hexnode to not only be able to detect that the malware is there, the zero-day malware is there, but then, as Paul said in the beginning, to perform an action automatically to remove it through Hexnode. So that's I think we get started there if anyone else wants to jump in.
Yeah, and just to Chris's point, right? I think what's really important as we see all these tools, the co-pilots that come in and start helping developers, because at the end of the day, all these developers, be they malicious or general developers, want to come out with feature functionality, and they start embedding, very importantly, what are libraries out there, open source libraries also. And how do you detect that, right? If you have source code analyzing tools, they can't get to it, they don't get to the libraries. And many times, even the malicious actors, like you said, Kevin, obfuscate a lot of their code in there. So you can't analyze the code, right? You have to look at what is called behavior. So I think that's the next level of behavioral analysis to detect a malicious behavior, right? So I think that's very key. So you can catch 0 days, and then at the end of the day, where our analysis comes, risk scores it, provides it back to Hexnode. Hexnode, we don't take remediation because we're not on the device, right? And that's where Hexnode takes the actions. Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah. Paul, anything?
Yeah, I was just going to say the automation and the fact that Quokka uses an agentless platform for gathering this information and analyzing and then reporting is very, very powerful. And it's a great tool set, and it's a different way of addressing security. As Chris said, identifying malicious use of legitimate applications or legitimate actions is a big issue, and having that ability from a behavioral standpoint to identify where that risk or that threat vector is very, very powerful. And it's something, that all IT administrators should be concerned about and looking further into.
Yeah, fully agree. Yeah, this is cutting edge stuff, just the way it's evaluating it, hasn't been looked at from this angle. And too bad it's not the old days where everyone clearly wore the white hat or the black hat. Simpler times. Yeah, moving on to the next question. For the foundational layer, a significant pain point for many organizations is the lack of visibility they have inside their mobile apps. Traditional security often falls short here. So, Chris and VJ, could you delve into Quokka's core strengths here? How does your mobile app risk intelligence platform perform such deep analysis to uncover intricate threats like data exfiltration, app collusion, unsafe permission abuses, particularly those that manifest after installation? VJ, you wanna start?
Yeah, absolutely. Just some background on Quokka, right? I mean, we have a great name, right? Quokka, the happiest animal on earth, right? Mostly genetically, it has this perpetual smile, but really originally started in academia. I call that out because this deep bench strength, right? Proprietary analysis tools that were built, many years back, but it's been developed over time, right? Our core strength stands from academia. Our R&D actually were students, engineers were students of the professor who actually started Quokka, helping out the government, right? So roots in government also. So we write papers, for example, I mentioned the thing about deep analysis of of libraries, SBOMs, right? We've actually written a paper on it and presented at places like even DEF CON, right? So deep intelligence out there that we have, proprietary engines. And over time, as we kept analyzing more and more applications, we started looking at categories of applications, just like you mentioned, right? So we call them, for example, harvester apps, apps that users may knowingly give information to, right? Many years back, when we had initially started, we were the first ones to talk about, though now it's not the case as much, which is, apps like TikTok, right? Um, Earlier this year, it was DeepSeek, right? So where data is there, the harvesting data, where does that data go? And is your data at risk, right? Especially highly compliant or regulatory environments where you don't want your data going to risky nations, for example. You want to know where your data goes, right? So those are some of the apps. We call them harvester apps, for example. Chris just mentioned colluding apps. One app may look benign on its own, but then is it colluding with another app, and together they're exfiltrating information, right? All of this you understand by not looking at an app on its own. You have to look at the entirety of the apps on the device, right? So that's the deep analysis we come from. Some of the things, like you mentioned, we call them shifty apps. Apps that, initially the developer submits, gets approved. Well, guess what? After a while, that app keeps asking for more and more permissions, which it doesn't need. What does the user do? After a while, those users, they'll say, okay, fine, I'll grant you this permission to my microphone, to everything, access my files, just get me to my data, right? Let me be productive today, right? So, so those are the kinds of things we see, and you can't do this on the device itself, right? That's why we call out this approach where we can scan any app in binary format from the app stores. Now, these could be apps you're developing. We actually help developers make sure their apps don't have security and privacy issues. And then on the other side, the malicious apps, right? Detect apps which are inherently malicious, right? So, so that's the kind of deep analysis that is done by us in the cloud. And you don't want to do it on the device. You know why? Because there's privacy concerns, right? Also, you got to make sure that you're analyzing apps out there, making sure, and we do this at scale. Just wanted to call out another thing, right? And we know because we know the app developers, right? When you develop apps, in certain cases, you may also put a shielding SDK, right, called a RASP. But then, if you're not in the development lifecycle, if you're app vetting applications, can you analyze those applications? Right? So that's one of the key capabilities we have built over the years, which is what we call RASP friendly, right? We can make sure the RASP is operating properly, the right controls are in place, security, privacy threats have been addressed, right? So I think these are the key capabilities that you need to bring in, you need to do it at scale, automate it, and then you have to work, in our case, with somebody who enforces it, which in this case is Hexnode.
Yeah, I wanted to add in, there's a question that came in from the audience as well about like classifying the app risk levels based on, the type of application. And that's a great point because we see this often when we go into a customer environment. They may be using something that gives them just, let's say, surface level results. You get a risk of 1 to 10. This app is a 5, this app is a 9, this app is a 10. But they often see that, hey, when I use this tool, all of my Microsoft apps are 10s. And then there's all these other apps that are 10s too. How do I know which ones to block? I'm not going to block my Microsoft ones. So that's where we get into that next level down, what we call the deep insights, where you can then view why something is being flagged and put it into context. So that deep intelligence where we're looking at, hey, these are the behaviors, these are the security risks, and this is the data that's impacted. These are the ways that these risks come about in the application. You can then make a decision as a security admin to say, that Microsoft app, yeah, it's got a connection to, let's say, China, but it's a Microsoft.cn domain. It's only active when I go there. So I'll allow that risk and ignore it going forward. So don't warn me about that anymore because I reviewed it and I don't want to see it anymore. But then you get a 10 again from another app, and it's an app called Cam Scanner that one of your users downloaded because they were searching on the App Store for something to scan in PDFs, maybe to sign an NDA, to do something else. And it's got 50 connections to China, which include all the data that the app is capturing with its camera. Those two alerts are very different when put in context. And our platform allows you to then view into that, look at the results, look at the deep data that is flagging those risks, and then make a determination. So you can correctly ignore one alert and set it to not alert you again, and you can make action on the next alert and say remove that app from these devices, the 10 devices that it's installed on with Hexnode. So thanks. Anyone else?
Yeah, Chris, you bring up a great example. Somebody in the company, decides I need to sign an NDA. Let me look for an app. Our phones are so powerful. Our devices are so powerful. There are so many apps out there that we think are making our lives easier, that we're being more efficient. We're being more ready for the day. And it's so easy to download something and take action, but rarely do we think about what is the vulnerability, what is the impact, the greater impact potentially to my company. When I install this app and actually use it, I think I'm making my job more efficient and better. But it could potentially open up a gateway to data exfiltration. It could open up for any other type of vulnerability. So that's really the strength of this partnership, identifying where those risks are and then using a platform like Hexnode to be able to take action on the risk.
Yeah, very interesting stuff. Yeah, I think we're all guilty of not reading agreements or just hitting accept. I'll be the first to raise my hand, on that. Um, so yeah, and moving on to the next question. Identifying sophisticated threats is one thing, but acting on them decisively at scale is another. This is where Hexnode's role in the partnerships becomes critical. So I'll direct this question to Paul. How does the Hexnode UEM translate Quokka's insight into automated policy-driven enforcement? If you could walk us through the workflows that allow administrators to not just detect, but block and quarantine these risky apps, ensuring rapid and consistent security posture across the fleet without a ton of manual intervention. Can you speak to that?
Yeah, sure. Just a little side note about Hexnode and the history. Hexnode is 12 years old. We've been developing a unified endpoint management platform that has allowed us to deploy to thousands and thousands of customers worldwide. At 12 years old, we are, very happy with the progress, the capabilities, and a very, very rich feature set. But one of the things that we've always kept in mind also is the usability. As I had said earlier, the endpoints are the battlefield, particularly on mobile phones, mobile tablets, things like that. When we think of security, I think VJ had said it earlier, we're thinking about the desktops, the laptops that are connected to the network in a corporate building where people show up every day, but more and more people are using their phones and their tablets to do more of the work, where they might not be connected to that network and may not have the same security protections. So where the relationship with Hexnode and Quokka is so strong is the fact that, Quokka will continuously monitor the apps. Hexnode can trigger automated actions, and then we can jointly ensure the compliance and security going forward of those applications and those individual devices. So, if we look at creating a workflow and what does that mean, for this level of security on devices, there's 5 areas that need to be considered, and they're pretty straightforward. How do we do the app risk detection? Well, that's easy. That's through Quokka. Hexnode can send a complete library at device level of all applications to be scanned, to be addressed, to be looked at. Then, we can create policies based on different types of responses. We can set up policies that are in line with corporate policies on how applications are managed, how data is managed, who has access rights to particular applications, and how those devices are controlled. What is compliance alignment in that organization? And that could be whether it's GDPR, it could be HIPAA, it could be anything that aligns with your industry. Then, based on those policies, we want to be able to do automated blocking or quarantining or any type of remediation as suggested by Quokka after they've done the evaluation and say, okay, this app is good, but you need to block this capability or this feature or this line of communication, or remove it, or say, until it gets remediated, can't be used any longer. So again, Hexnode can then work through the workflow to be able to take those actions. And then there's the real-time monitoring and alerts. How often do you want to know? On what severity levels? What severity levels do you want to take automatic action on? What severity levels do you want to take approval on? Or which security levels do you want to potentially ignore or save for a later day? And then the 5th area being scalable and rapid deployment. Do I want this fleet-wide? Do I want it to a specific user group? Maybe executives have one level of protection versus because of the sensitive data and nature of what they do on their devices versus somebody that might be working in a warehouse, scanning barcodes. So there's different areas, but policies can be established for different areas and executed at different times based on what those policies are. So, an example of a workflow could be, Quokka identifies an app on an employee's device that's trying to exfiltrate sensitive data. They send the notification to Hexnode. Hexnode is then able to do a policy trigger. Hexnode's pre-configured policy basically says, based on that data exfiltration, we're going to, and Quokka's risk score, we're going to block that. We see it as high risk, and we're going to quarantine that app immediately, no longer usable on that device. Then the automated action is notification. It's blocking the device, it's blocking the application, it's letting the user know that there's an issue here. The notification goes out to administrators, and it shows up in Hexnode's dashboard for the IT administrator to then also take action. If there's another integration into call tracking system, a help desk ticket could also be created, and then ultimate compliance checks after the remediation is done. So that workflow can be configured and maintained across all different types of devices, all different areas, different user groups. It's pretty open and very flexible, and it's an easy workflow to establish. And our workflow creation through our automate capability is very simple, easy to use, very intuitive, and it gives you all the information right at your fingertips to be able to repeat that process across different types of policies and configurations.
I love the note there, Paul, about the the user notification being as an option as well, because I think traditionally people think, as I open my Apple App Store or my Google Play Store, everything's safe. It's, it's a playground. I can go download anything, Apple's already looked at it. It doesn't matter. But when you, find something, let's say that scanning application that's harvesting all your data, and you let them know, hey, we found this and this is why, and here's some more details, then that user can, also up level themselves and say, maybe I shouldn't just click download or install everywhere I see it on the store. I should, maybe be a little bit more cyber safe. So also help to, help people help themselves be secure along the way.
Looks like, yeah, we have a question from the audience that kind of ties into this. I think it's good to touch on. Can a non-risky app become risky after updates? And if that answer is yes, is it possible to continuously monitor such changes?
Absolutely. That's Kevin, where I mentioned the shifty apps, right? We give these them some names here too. So the idea is, initially it starts off, gets approved, but then things change. You keep adding more. Now, definitely, you have to continuously monitor it. You can't do it, at one point in time, and that's exactly what we do here, which is we call it a watch list. The watch list is we monitor all these applications, and as they change, versions change, obviously in the App Store, we take a look at them, reanalyze them, and then if we actually summarize them over time, so you can see that the risk actually of the app going up over time, and that causes a trigger, right? The delta is a lot between previous time and the analysis now. So absolutely, you
Yeah.
have to monitor.
And I think in terms of the customers that we've been engaged with, there is this is an evolving thing that people are now paying attention to with mobile as well, because in the past you might get away with doing like one manual test per year. But today, how many versions on average is there for a popular application on Android or iOS? Usually up to 3 a month that get released. So if you're scanning once per year, you're scanning one of 30 or 40 versions that may be installed on your fleet. So you don't actually have very good insight into what actually is there on the ground. And I think this kind of leads us into the next question, maybe Kevin, on zero trust. Ties into the continuous monitoring piece as well, because if you're only doing that point in time check, you're missing the exposure that you may have throughout the year. So we've seen things in the past where, a customer has scanned an app in 2015 because they first onboarded it to their devices in 2015. Well, we're 10 years later, and how much has your phone changed in the last 10 years, and how many new features do you think that app has added and even removed over that time? So we not only see increases in and risk over time, but we also see things where there might be a spike where you have safe, 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 very unsafe because they made a change, and then the next version they revert it. But if you're not monitoring and you only see safe, safe, skip, safe, safe, you're missing that exposure that you would have, and the ability to protect yourselves from that as well. So extremely important topic there.
Yeah.
And
Very
with
good.
Hexnode and creating policies around that, we can initiate those scans as often as you think it's necessary for your particular business or specific types of applications. So, you might not be interested in looking at your entire fleet or your entire application library, but you can also segment it to specific applications that are most important to you or what you allow on your network and consistently check those on a regular basis. So, however you want to establish that policy, as I had said earlier, in terms of creating those policies, it's pretty straightforward. It's
Terrific.
not
Yeah.
necessarily a once and done thing.
Yeah. No, very important point. Fleet's ever changing, the apps are ever changing, Uh, if anyone out there is still using their same Moto Razor from 2008 just to stay secure, you don't have to anymore. Come see us. Um, Next question, for IT and security leaders grappling with sprawling mobile fleets, particularly in BYOD situations, deployment friction is a concern. The promise of rapid agentless deployment is undoubtedly appealing. Could you elaborate on the architectural advantages of this agentless approach for mobile app security? I think this would be good that VJ kick it off and maybe Paul chime in as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So this was the story I promised at the start of this conversation, right? So, at a big UEM company, embedded security from a third-party vendor. Well, one of the initial things is how do you activate this agent which is on the device, right? That in itself had so much friction, right? Where the OS changes. Obviously, Apple and Google are making changes to the OS. That changes. The registration breaks. The actual agent doesn't register. And the end user is not going to do it because they're like, what is this thing on my device? I don't even know what it is. But, IT has told me, to have it, so it's fine. So what happens is the fleet of devices are unprotected now, even though the MDM agent is there, but the security agent didn't activate itself. So that in itself, causes a lot of friction when you actually have an agent on the device, right? The other thing was the privacy concerns, as I mentioned, right? Having something on the device which continuously looks at files, processes, affects end user privacy, especially when you have to comply with things like here in California, CCPA or GDPR, right? Things like that. You got to take that into account, right? So, and finally, really, if you look at it, the OS vendors, Apple, Google, keep sandboxing the environment. So having something on the device is, when everything is sandboxed, you're not going to get as much intelligence. And what happens is, as I mentioned in the past, we had our CIO deploy it internally as a drink your own champagne or eat your own dog food. At the end of the year, they turned it off because there was too much noise, right? There was too much noise. The devices were not getting activated. Security was not across the fleet. So when we took this approach, it was like, let's make it agentless. The MDM is always going to be there on that device. It's managed or unmanaged, right? It's always there. It's activated. It's running, doing its stuff. An agentless mechanism, you turn it on, guess what? 100% across your fleet that is managed, you get instant security, right? So, plus with privacy, when the analysis is done in the cloud continuously with the watch list that somebody called out, you're getting all that intelligence and at the same time feeding it back into your Hexnode MDM capabilities. So those are some of the things actually which are best practices, and we see more and more customers, leaning towards
Yeah.
now.
Paul, before you jump in, I just wanted to hitch on to that, VJ. It wasn't only your CIO. I've talked to many customers over the last year that said, I spend more time making sure that agent is active than I actually do reviewing anything it gives me. So if that's your problem, if you're spending more time on, making sure that your security tool is working rather than using the information it gives you, maybe agentless is right for you. So Paul, over to you.
Yeah, the strength of agentless, in particular, when you look at, the two different types of deployments that a lot of organizations have for their mobile fleet, it's either corporate owned, where the company offers it, gives it to the employee to use and says, these are the parameters, these are the use policies, et cetera, and they can completely control that device is one thing. And you can put as much on there as you want because you own it. At the end of the day, though, in a bring your own device environment, now you have to deal with, as VJ had said, privacy concerns. From a company standpoint, that footprint of the container that the MDM establishes for the corporate portion, you want to keep that as small, as nimble, and as concentrated as possible. So that agentless is one less thing that needs to get deployed, but it gives you that still secure power, that wrapper around all of the applications and the protection for those applications against, the types of things that VJ was talking about earlier, shifty apps, data exfiltration, and other vulnerabilities, over access to different, features of the phone or device. So, the strength of it being agentless, particularly in a bring your own device environment, is very powerful message. And I would think that it would make a lot more people, particularly around the privacy question and concern that a lot of organizations have, make the Quokka Hexnode solution stand out as a leader in terms of how security is delivered for specifically mobile application security.
Fully agree. So this this is the last question here. Uh, Finally, in an era where regulatory scrutiny is intense and zero trust is more than just a buzzword, every security investment must clearly align with a broader compliance framework. How does the combined power of Hexnode and Quokka position organizations to satisfy stringent compliance mandates like GDPR and HIPAA? And beyond compliance, how does this integrated solution support a advanced, robust zero trust architecture? Chris, you want to kick us off?
Sure. So in the past, 10 years I've been working with Quokka, we've done a lot of engagements with actually the folks that create these standards. So whether it's, VJ mentioned our roots in the government, so it could be NIST, National Institute of Standards and Technologies, who releases guidance like how to properly implement enterprise mobile security through bring your own device, through corporate owned, personally enabled, and through other models. So we've actually participated as a sample vendor in those programs. So if you look up their guidance papers, you'll see our names listed there as a core piece. And through CISA, when they released their Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency released their zero trust principles for enterprise mobility just recently. And if you look at the key technologies, they align very well with what NIST said back in the day as well, back in 2019, 2020. And I'll just list a couple of those things off for you to see, is this combined solution checking the box? Well, first thing is enterprise mobility management, or UEM. Check. Policy enforcement technologies, automated. Check. User device authentication. Check. Mobile application vetting. Ensure applications comply with enterprise policies and do not contain vulnerabilities and risks. Check. Mobile application management, secure containers, and I can go on, but you can see through the things that the experts in the field are suggesting for using, ensuring compliance with these different policies, whether it's NIST policies or NIST guidance, whether it's zero trust frameworks. These two technologies tied together are key pillars of all of these compliance frameworks, and by hooking them up the way that we have with this partnership, it enables you to meet that compliance threshold immediately rather than having to go stitch a bunch of tools together yourself. Go find this tool, go find that tool, combine them into one. Well, the package is here for you, and it's meeting all of those different NIST zero trust guidance by doing things like that continuous monitoring that the audience member asked. um, One of the common themes of zero trust is comply to connect, and ensuring that you, by nature, don't trust any piece of software, any device, any user that just shows up on your environment. So if you aren't scanning every one of your apps, then you are by default trusting it. So in order to reach that true zero trust, where you're scanning every piece of software that's running on your devices, scanning every device and ensuring that it has repeatability and communication back to your management console, you need something that can combine these technologies into one in order to actually meet those compliance objectives. And I believe we've got a great way to help you skip from nothing to full coverage with just one technology purchase through Hexnode and Quokka.
Yeah, if I could just elaborate that on that a little bit further, so from the standpoint of zero trust and looking at compliance and certifications, you assume that on the day that you deploy, you are protected, you are under control, you are compliant. But it's over time, how do I impact those changes that, or understand those changes that have happened either, to what are the standards, my company policies, and so on, or even changes in the app or changes in how the app is being used. So how do I go and adapt and evolve those changes across my entire fleet without having to recall every single one of those devices back to IT to be manually affected. So between Hexnode and Quokka, we are able to continuously monitor, continuously change, and evolve the security and zero trust footprint from day to day, hour to hour, however is necessary.
Yeah, and one more thing that I think we brought up in the past in this conversation was, it's a lot about security, it's a lot about analysis, but at the end of the day, there's this thing called digital experience, right? It is not about adding more and more technology, to make things secure. It's also what is the experience. And frankly, when we were doing the integration, I'll tell you, my product guys and my engineering guys were blown away by the experience they got with the Hexnode, MDM deployments, the interfaces, and how easy it is to get deployed up and running. I mean, if you think from an admin perspective, they're doing so many things, right? One less thing to worry about, enforce, kind of, the line set it and forget it. But at the end of the day, set it, get triggers as needed, less noise, actionable. So I think zero trust is great. It's a great framework. Never trust, always verify. But at the end of the day, give the admin and the end user a great experience. I think that's what we bring to the table too.
Awesome. Yeah. Looks like we have one last question from an attendee. So using personal devices at work, like BYOD setup, very common nowadays. So does this actually make things riskier for the user?
Yeah, I can jump in just tagging off of the compliance suggestion or the compliance question. One of those NIST guidance that we worked on was bring your own device. So bring your own device doesn't mean no security and no management. It just means that it is a personal device being brought in to do work on. So in terms of how you can secure those devices and what types of features you can, use to secure those devices, it doesn't have to be any different, whether it's a company provided device or a personal device that's brought in. So you can still apply these same approaches of management, co-management, secure containers, application vetting, and continuous monitoring in the BYOD scenario, just as you can in a corporate-owned scenario. Paul, anything else to add to
Yeah,
that?
and in BYOD again, as you said, it's not a untamed range out there. It is something that is actually very controlled from the standpoint of when you enroll that BYOD, bring your own device. In a Hexnode environment, Hexnode establishes a very secure container on that device that holds the apps, and then policies can control when those apps are available. You could set up time parameters that says between this hour and this hour during my work hours, I have access to these apps. After work hours, expunge all of that information off of my phone, and I don't have to worry about it until the next morning. Or it could be based on geo tracking or geofencing from the standpoint of as soon as I leave the parking lot of my facility, I no longer have access to that. There are so many flexible ways to control BYOD devices that will make, that will address, as Vijay said, the user experience and that they feel more secure about their devices and how it's actually being used for personal use and for business use.
All right. Yeah. Great questions from the audience. So I know we're right up at time. So we'll just wrap by saying, this integration is ready. So if anyone in the audience watching now, watching later, has questions, wants to discuss if this makes sense for your environment, see the actual demo, just reach out to us. We'll be happy to make some time and connect with you on that at a time that works for you. And This brings us to the end of an exciting session. Thank you, gentlemen, for taking the time and sharing your expertise. And, thanks everyone for watching.
Yeah. Thanks, Kevin. I wanted to call out, just say we'll be down at HexCon next month. So if you haven't registered, please register. We'd be glad to show you this live in person and hope to see you there.
Yeah, awesome. HexCon, September 17th and 18th, Atlanta area. Reach out to us if you want more info on that. All right. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.
Right.
Thanks.